Before we get started on this video, let me give you a little warning. This could potentially turn into a long-winded rant. Nah. But I really do want to be clear about, I just want to clear the air about certain misconceptions about my hi-fi reviews. And I think this probably applies to other reviewers as well. Now, if you're one of those people that click away within a minute or two, I really encourage you to watch this to the very end, because hopefully you will see kind of what we go through. And I want to respond particularly to a comment. That's what actually prompted this video. Because normally I tend to just ignore drive-by comments, the trolls and that sort of thing, because all YouTubers get them. But this one kind of hit home, and I wanted to address it. I really feel it needs to be addressed. And here we go. And this came from, as I said, a comment, and it was the other day. It was regarding a video I made about why all DACs and streamers don't sound the same. So Ismail Martinez PR1 the other day left this comment, which I'm going to read. You are just lying to yourself if you think you can distinguish differences from one streamer or DAC to another. Unless you perform a lab test or a double blind with at least 10 consecutive results, is simply not valid. You need to consider that you are in your 60s or early 70s. Yeah, I'm 66. And just like every other human, we suffer from presbycusis, essentially hearing loss as we age. I could have just said that. Anyhow, humans lose the ability to listen, which makes human ears, especially mature ones, mine for example, the worst instrument for determining any differences. And finally, if you can listen to a difference, a machine can detect it. So in lieu of not having measurements, you are just an opinion head. YouTube reviewers, new media, paid media, yes, you are paid media for all the brands you cover. If a piece of gear is sent to you and you are paid media, as if you become just like all YouTube reviewers, overly critical, the gear train will stop and no products available for content. This does not mean you're a bad person. That's in the thumbnail. Hopefully you are not. I'd like to think I'm not. I'm just saying that this is an opinion channel based on what you hear, which is and will be different from person to person, which lessens the usefulness of the content other than seeing the products and the features. Wow. Okay, let's talk about that. Well, first off, most drive-by comments, these folks don't really have an active YouTube channel at all. They've never made a video in life. He has. I think I counted like 24 videos on his YouTube channel. I think the latest one was from 4 years ago. And I have a very strong feeling English isn't his first language. So either maybe some things got lost in translation, maybe he used software to translate. I don't know. But that being said, I don't think he fully appreciates the dedication, the hard work it really does take to become a YouTuber. As I said, I deal with drive-by comments all the time. They don't really bother me. I just get rid of them. No big deal. But that being said, reviewers are not necessarily bad people, Ismail, because I do from time to time give a negative review. For example, I just reviewed the Auralic LP10 streamer, and I recommended to the viewers not to buy it. It's got too many weird stuff, or too much weird stuff going on with the software. It's just not a good deal for the money. But this is a person who obviously believes that only measurements matter. Okay? Just measurements. If it doesn't measure with machines, then we don't care about subjective opinions. Okay, let me explain this about the gear. First off, I'm not a philanthropist. I'm requested to compare this gear to that gear all the time. Now, if I wasn't getting either gear provided to me, or if I didn't earn some income from affiliate links, that sort of thing, then I wouldn't be able to get the gear to review that I do get. Okay, so it's not philanthropy. So why do I do this? Why do I make these videos? Well, I gotta tell you, I live in a small town, and a number of people in this town, they don't care about hi-fi. They don't care about great sounding audio, okay? They're just like everybody else, you know, their phone, earbuds, whatever, and that's their idea of listening to good sounding music. I want to share my experience with hi-fi with like-minded people, you know, people that enjoy the same hobby I do, so we can share information with one another, compare notes, and I try to give my honest opinion about the gear that I review. You know, I hope to encourage younger people to enter this hobby so there is an audiophile market down the road. And I'm doing this particularly as desktop hi-fi because I feel this is a great way to encourage younger people to get in the hobby, because a lot of this gear is very affordable and very good sounding gear. And I enjoy the comments. I enjoy making new friends. Bottom line is, it's all about the music and the gear as well. And I love listening to this stuff. Now, what I'd like to do now is share with you how I obtain the gear I get for review. I gotta be honest with you, I get a lot, every day I get email asking me to review various products, most of which have no connection at all to hi-fi. Okay, I won't even go on all the weird stuff they ask you to. But I do occasionally get something legit, all right? And then in turn, there's also companies I reach out to as well. But I always ask for the gear on loan. However, if they're willing to provide it to me for no charge, well, I'll tell you what I do with that in just a moment. I can't attend trade shows right now. My health, my wife's health, I'm working through cancer treatment. My wife is not well. And I had a business that would not permit me the time to go attend trade shows. Up until I get completely well, and I'm in remission from cancer now, I should be able to start doing some of these things down the road. And I will meet some manufacturers and shake hands and meet some other hi-fi reviewers. But until that time, most my gear I get is through correspondence via email and companies reaching out to me and me reaching out to them. I'd like to share with you, by the way, just exactly what I tell these companies when they ask me to review a product. So I'm going to read this to you verbatim. Thank you for asking me to review your product. I will be happy to do so. However, I do have a few requirements before I accept an item for review. Number one, the product must be sent directly to me. I will not order from Amazon and be refunded by PayPal. That is against the Amazon affiliate program rules. Number two, I typically require 6 to 8 weeks upon receipt of the item to complete a review. This allows adequate time to properly evaluate the product. 3, all opinions are my own and no one will review the video prior to posting on YouTube. And I maintain 100% creative control of the contents of my videos. 4, I will not guarantee a positive review in exchange for a product. It is preferable to receive the item on loan. See that? On loan. I produce honest content and I will share the good and the bad with my audience. And 5, I do not offer paid reviews or endorsements at this time. So if this is acceptable to you, then you are welcome to send the product. And I leave my address. And that is how I handle that. So the question is, well, if I'm given this gear, what do I do with it? I'm obviously selling it and pocketing the cash, right? Wrong. I can't speak for other reviewers, but I try to give these products to people I know that can use them. I donate to charity. I give to churches and not Goodwill, Salvation Army and schools, people that can use this stuff. I don't have the facilities to store endless amounts of products, box them up and sit them on a shelf. It's not doing me any good. I can't use all these different amps and DACs and all the other gear I use. And I'm not in it to get gear to turn around and sell. That's simply not how I operate. And I don't think most reviewers are. So I would prefer to have gear sent to me on loan so when I'm done reviewing it, I can send it back. but I am not selling gear for profit. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room. My age, my ability to hear frequencies, etc. Okay, Ismail, here is where I think you are a bit misguided. First off, if I'm putting up a graphic that shows you about 80% of the music is somewhere between 20 hertz and 8 to 10 kilohertz. It's really about knowing what to listen for when you're reviewing hi-fi. I'm going to give you this analogy. I'm kind of an analogy guy. When I was a young man, I loved hot rods. I spent practically all my free time wrenching on hot rods. I would take them to drag strips. We would do quarter-mile racing, etc. And I learned very quickly, after rebuilding engines, pulling engines, putting motors in, I learned very quickly what to listen for to ensure that motor was running at peak performance when I took it to the strip. That doesn't mean that I put it on a dynamometer, we call it a dyno, measuring horsepower and all that right before we went to the light to race, okay? I just made sure that the valves sounded good. We didn't have any rods knocking. We had make sure the carburetors were in sync because I was running dual 4 barrels. yeah. No, it was a 6-pack. It was a it was a 6-pack. I'm sorry, 6-pack. Oh, regardless. But I knew what to listen for in that engine to make sure it was operating optimally. And I think you could apply that same knowledge after years and years and years of being around hi-fi of certain things to listen for. All right, let's talk just briefly. I am a subjective reviewer. I have seen products that measure fantastic and not sound that great, okay? That just is a fact of life. But there are devotees to channels such as Audio Science Review, and I have no problem with them whatsoever. I think they're performing a valuable service to the community. However, not everything is about measurements. Some things measure terribly but sound fantastic, depending on the listener. I'll give you an example. How about tube amplifiers? Tube amplifiers, that warm tube sound you're hearing, that's distortion, but a lot of audiophiles love it. They love the warmth of the sound. That's just one example of many. So I'm a subjective reviewer. I basically try to share, and let me go on to this, how I review an item. I try to treat each product like somebody just bought the gear, right? I try to cover the unboxing, what you're getting for your money. And I believe in my reviews, the gear should be the star and not oscilloscopes and 10,000 graphs and all that. The gear should be the star of the show. And I try to focus on things like the build quality, the features, the use case of the product, the sound quality, and the overall value. And I also try to focus on gear under $1,500. What do I listen for? Well, let's start with tonality, frequency, balance, those things. For example, the mids. Are the vocals forward? They recessed? They clear? They muddy? Is the bass tight? Is it punchy? Is it bloated? Extended? Is it rolled? Treble? Is it smooth? Airy? Sibilant? Or harsh? What about detail retrieval? That's another area. Can I hear the breath on some of the vocals? Can I hear the fingers plucking the strings, sliding on the strings? I also listen for soundstage and imaging. The imaging is to pinpoint where each instrument is on the stage, for example. And finally, the soundstage. Is it wide, is it tall, or is it deep? The dynamics of the device. We've got microdynamics. That's real subtle shifts in the volume and the energy. And then there's macro dynamics, and that's your big, punchy transients that slam. Think the cannons in the 1812 overture. Then the timbre, which is the naturalness of the sound. Does the violin sound like wood and string, or does it sound like plastic and wire? Are vocals lifelike, or do they sound processed? And Lord knows I can't stand auto-tune in music, but that's for a video at a different time. Then there's the synergy and use case. For example, let's say you have a warm-sounding DAC. Well, you can kind of tone those bright speakers down with a warm-sounding DAC, for example. If you have a low wattage amplifier, then you want to work with maybe higher sensitivity speakers. And how's the product work best for? Is the desktop versus the living room? You're going to be using it for near field, for example. That's important to keep those things in mind. I'd also like to address why I think being a little bit older is actually an advantage as opposed to a disadvantage as a reviewer. Number one, I've lived through the entire analog to digital revolutions, all right? And I started on this stuff when your only options were reel-to-reel, FM radio. We had FM stereo back, and then in the cave we had, I'm just kidding. But we had that, we had cassette, and we had vinyl. That was it. I went 8-track. And that was it. And then we moved on to the digital revolution. Matter of fact, I remember me and a buddy of mine who was also a huge audiophile and had really expensive gear. When the first CD players hit for sale, they were actually down in Indianapolis, and me and my buddy, we drove all the way down there. He had the cash to buy it, and it was ungodly expensive, those first CD players. And I believe the CD they had was maybe the first CD for sale was Billy Joel's 52nd Street, I think. We listened to it and go, nope, this sounds horrible. It doesn't even sound nowhere as good as on the album, on the vinyl. So we passed. He passed on it. And we said, you know what, let's wait about a few years and see if this improves. So I remember all that. So I remember what great sound was like before things like digital signal processing, before there was Class D amplifiers, before the loudness wars. So I think I can put things into contents that, maybe a 25-year-old reviewer can't fake. Simple as that. And I also think I represent a really massive audience. Many hi-fi enthusiasts are 40 plus years old, and they appreciate somebody they can relate to, especially in their perspective. So my reviews, really, I'm interested in the long-term value of a product and not just spec sheet comparisons. Computers and AI can do that. I'm talking about real world, sitting down, listening to it and tell you from somebody that's been around hi-fi their whole life, whether or not I think this is a high-value item. So I hope this video gives you an overview of what it's really like to put yourself out there reviewing products or, simply creating content for YouTube. Well, hopefully you've stayed around long enough to hear my side of the equation and what it's like to be a hi-fi reviewer. But I've reviewed other gear, computers and software and so forth. But for some reason, I never had to deal with somebody saying, because you're just too old to do this. Matter of fact, I see it as a benefit and an advantage. And yes, I can still hear what really is important. I know what to listen for. And that's it. Bruce Naylor, Desktop Hi-Fi. For those who's sticking with me from the transition from the boomer consumer to desktop hi-fi, thank you so much. I appreciate your continued support.